Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Bittner. I'm a digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I am here for the post-game Post-Gazette Sports Now show after a crazy day at Acrisure Stadium. The Steelers losing to the New York Jets in heartbreaking fashion in the final seconds. I'm joined today by Paul Zeise of the Post-Gazette. Before I get into all the intros, Paul, I think there were a lot of storylines today. The collapse at the end, Kenny Pickett coming into the game. What is your big story as you sit here moments after the game ended? You're at Acrisure Stadium right now.
Well, I would say obviously Kenny Pickett coming into the game is the story of the game. But here's the thing. The other story of the game is this. The defense is very overrated and just not very good. And you know what? Maybe they get TJ Watt back and things change, but Kenny Pickett is a rookie quarterback. He threw a couple of interceptions. Both of them, the receivers had chances to make them, but one was into double coverage. The other was high, and probably should have been thrown away, especially given the situation. You live with that with a rookie. So, I know that everyone will be talking about the quarterback, and, it is what it is. It's the quarterback, and, of course, it's Kenny Pickett and that. He'll get better, and as he gets more experience, some of those throws, he'll throw them away. I'm telling you what, Adam, what people should be talking about with this team is that the strength of the team was supposed to be the defense, and they're not. I mean, how do you allow the Jets to go right down the field basically twice to score to win the game? That is to me far more troublesome than the quarterback. I mean, really, I said it before. I think if you put Mitch Trubisky, I'm assuming he could have made a 4-yard drive there and maybe another drive, and they'd have got 20 points. But 20 points should have been enough to beat the Jets. And so, everyone will talk about the quarterback situation. We should be talking about the defense. And the defense, to me, has been really not very good these last 3 weeks, especially at crunch time.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot to get into. I think you set it up well, Paul. But before we do, if you're joining us for the first time and you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please open this video on YouTube and hop in the chat there, and we will try to get to as many of your questions. Also, help us out with the YouTube algorithm if you would, please. Pop a like on this video, and maybe consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss any of our videos. We've had a lot going on the last couple of weeks. We talked to Heinz Ward last week, so hit that subscribe button. Also, please consider our subscription deal. We are doing 6 months of access for just $6. That is in the description of this video, so click right down here, and you can get that deal, and you can get everything I'm writing, everything Paul's writing, everything all of our Steelers writers are reporting after going into what's going to be a big week. You can get all that for just $6, $1 a month, the rest of football season. So with that, I want to get into the quarterbacks first, Paul, because I definitely want to talk about the defense like you do. But I think that's what a lot of people are here for, is this decision to move to Kenny Pickett to start the second half today. Were you surprised? Did you think it was coming? And what do you think of the decision to go to him, down 10-3 at halftime today?
Well, I mean, I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. I mean, and it kind of shocked me because it's not usually what Mike Tomlin does. But if you think about it now, this has been 4 or 5 halves of really kind of bad offensive football. You take away the first half against Cleveland, and really they haven't played very well offensively. And you're playing the Jets. You're not getting anything going. Nothing is going well. It looks like the offense is just sputtering and is sluggish. And so, you need a spark. And sometimes you make the change, Adam, not as much because you think Mr. Trubisky was the one that was really the cause of all the problems, but you're just looking for a little bit of a spark. And you bring in Kenny Pickett. There's going to be a little energy that comes into the stadium. There's probably going to be a little energy that comes into the offense. And you know what? For the most part, he came in and gave him a little bit of a spark. And that's really what you're looking for with that coaching change. I would assume that we will never see Mitch Trubisky taking another meaningful snap in a Steelers uniform unless there's an injury. But it won't shock me. And you've been around a long time with Mike Tomlin. It won't shock me if right now, actually, when he's speaking to the media, he says basically he hasn't made any decisions about going forward what they're going to do at quarterback. So to me, you had to do something. I mean, obviously the easier thing to do is change quarterbacks. But in the first half, penalties, negative plays, penalties. There was, Mitch Trubisky missing on some easy throws that he needs to make. It just the offense was lifeless. They weren't going anywhere. It was so, just sort of the same old, 4-yard pass, 3-yard, run, punt, interception, and all the penalties is ridiculous. So, yes, you have to go and make a change at that point. It's not like, last year or the year before where you have a Hall of Famer there. And if he's having a bad first half, you're like, well, it's Ben. He's going to figure it out. No, I mean, Mr. Trubisky hasn't earned that. And, of course, when you've got a first-round pick waiting in the wings, you might as well throw him out there and see what happens.
Kenny Longs asked us in the chat, if Kenny keeps struggling, will they give Mason a shot as starter? I'm going to ask the question to you a little bit differently, Paul. You kind of alluded to it. Do you think we've crossed the Rubicon? And regardless of what Mike Tomlin says in this post-game news conference, I mean, he said last week that this move was not coming today. If we take him at his word, that he didn't signal that he was going to be prepared to do this week. So do you think there's a Rubicon that's been crossed, regardless of what he says after the game today, and that this is Kenny Pickett's show for better or worse? Or do you think we might see more quarterback switches if the offense cannot kick it into gear?
If he goes back to Mitch Trubisky, then I think he loses all credibility with his locker room. I don't see how you do that. Kenny Pickett obviously threw the 3 interceptions. One obviously was the Hail Mary at the end, but still 3 interceptions. But it's pretty clear, I think, to everybody that watched this, that Kenny Pickett, they have a chance to be better with Kenny Pickett. 3 things that he does. Number one, he's very decisive with the football. He doesn't. Mitch Trubisky go back and take his time and try and figure it out, and almost like that deer in the headlights frozen thing, which in the NFL, that's generally a recipe to either throw interceptions or incompletions. Kenny Pickett, so he has that, number one. Number two, I think the other thing is Kenny Pickett has that element of you've got that sort of, I don't know how to say it, swag. Is that a word that he kind of takes the field? If you've ever seen, have you ever seen the movie Boiler Room? I don't know if you've ever seen that movie Boiler Room. It's about basically a bunch of young stockbrokers who work for one of these chop shops, almost like the Wolf of Wall Street type thing. And the guy walks in and his speech is basically, we have a saying here. It's act as if, act as if you're the president of this firm. Act as if you're the, toughest guy on the block, this and that and the other thing. Kenny Pickett, when he takes the field, he acts as if. And I think that the rest of the team will feed off of that. And then we saw, I tell you, one play that was very overrated that would not have happened with Mitch Trubisky. It was about a 3rd and 8, 3rd, 7, something like that. And Pickett rolled out and got a first down running, right? No hesitation at all. He rolled out, looked at his first read, saw it wasn't there, and just took off. Trubisky would have tried to, slow foot at that, and he would have waited. Then he would have taken off when the defense had recovered. Those are the kind of things you need from your quarterback. And so to me, I think the entire locker room knows, just like everybody sitting in the stands knows, that if they do this with Pickett, the offense has a chance maybe down the road to actually become functional. Now, the other thing, Adam, that we should talk about, I thought this was a huge regression for the offensive line. I thought the offensive line had taken some really good strides in week 2, and in week 3, I thought against Cleveland, I thought they played really well. But Dan Moore, had a holding call, and then was following it up with getting run past for a sack. Chooks had a couple of penalties, and he also had at least twice he got run past for either a sack or a quarterback hurry. The interior line got beat up a lot. I didn't see the final stats. I don't have them in front of me here, but they certainly didn't get the run game going the way they want to get it going. So, at the end of the day, the offense suffered from a number of things, but a big part of it is the offensive line regressed. They got a lot of penalties. Their run game still isn't what it is. And, I think we could go back and go through a number of play calls that you wonder, what they're thinking when they make those play calls. Well, I think one thing that probably is going to improve over the next few weeks is the quarterback play, and maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Were there any other plays, Paul, because you got into this a little bit, where you noticed the difference between Trubisky and Pickett? The one for me was when he had the rusher in his face and he completed that pass to Pat Freiermuth down the seam that set up, I think it was his second rushing touchdown. He just stood in there calmly. He laid it into Freiermuth, and then he got up and he was talking. I don't know whether he was joking or whether he was talking a little bit of junk, but we saw it on the broadcast. He was talking to a couple of Jets players and he had a smile on his face. To me, that was probably the play that I saw that I said, this guy looks different than what we've been watching the first couple of weeks.
Well, there was I would say the two quarterback sneaks, right? I mean, he and his second rushing touchdown. That's a play that Mitch Trubisky doesn't make. Even though Mitch Trubisky's a good rusher, again, that required Kenny Pickett to make a really quick decision and then go for it. And once he saw it and smelled, the goal line, he got to the end zone and scored. The other one is the throw to, was it Pickens on the sideline? He dropped back and threw like a dart, and Pickens obviously made an incredible catch. But that's a throw that Mitch Trubisky doesn't make. Not necessarily because he can't make it, but because he would not have recognized that quick enough and got rid of the ball quick enough. It would have been a late throw, which would have meant the defensive back would have recovered and either picked it off and ran down the sidelines or just knocked it down. So, there's clear differences between the two. And there will be people, because there's always detractors who will talk about the interceptions. But Adam, as I said, it was a rookie playing his first game. Those are things that you can clean up. Those are things where you can, through film and experience and everything else, he'll start to see and recognize situations. Like I guess it would be the second interception. You can't make that throw. You just can't. In that situation, you're up 3. In that situation, you don't need to be a hero there. Either take the sack, right? Try and make as much as you can make out of it, and you keep the clock moving, right? You keep the clock moving, you keep the ball in your hands, and then you've got third down to try and do something. And if you don't do it, you punt them down there. And if they're going to beat you, they're going to have to go 90 yards or whatever, But he'll learn that. That to me is the least what I would say troublesome thing that we saw with the offense or the interceptions. Because again, I think those are things you can easily clean up. I don't know how you clean up if your two tackles can't stop guys from rushing past them. If your interior guys can't, really create holes and not get blown up as much as they do, I don't know how you fix that. If your receivers, who, by the way, we talk about every week, and I'm so tired of hearing about it, how they're an elite receiving corps, when they can't make basic catches in key situations, I don't know how you fix that either. So to me, there's a lot that you need to work on the offense. But really, in so many ways, today's loss is really about the defense, because this was supposed to be a team, one of these elite defenses that if you got to 20, we're going to win the game for you. And, instead, they allowed the Jets to go not once but twice straight down the field to score touchdowns to win the game. And that is unacceptable.
If you are just joining us here on the Steelers postgame live stream here on the Post-Gazette YouTube channel and postgazette.com, please hop over to YouTube to add a comment or ask a question if you want. I want to get into the receivers real quick, Paul, because Wisdom asked us in the chat, how much at fault are the receivers dropping the balls, that were in their hands? And I think I agree with you on that, especially on that second interception. Given the time, given the score, that's not a throw Kenny Pickett can make, and that's not a risk he can take at that time. That said, it hit Pat Freiermuth in the hands, and the first interception hit Chase Claypool in the hands. And the CBS broadcast was saying Chase Claypool was on the sideline tapping himself like, "This is on me." This is the second week in a row where I think you can think of several high-profile moments where the receivers didn't make the plays that they have to make, regardless of whether the pass should or should not have been thrown. How much fault are these receivers at for the way things have gone the last couple of weeks? A, and B, how much more scrutiny are they going to be under if Kenny Pickett is the quarterback, and you can no longer blame Mitch Trubisky, for everything that's going wrong for this offense. And you have to, if Steelers fans have to find someone else to blame for what's going on.
Well, and that's going to be, the big thing is that at the end of the day, because even if you forget, Mitch Trubisky threw an interception in the first half that hit Deontay Johnson in the hands. And, of course, it's hilarious. People were trying to pin that one on Mitch. And then Kenny's too, it was, that's on the receivers. So you can't have it both ways. First of all, the one that hit Freiermuth, it was a high throw. Freiermuth, he got his hands on it, but it would have been a tough catch. But more importantly, in that situation, you don't need a hero throw and hero catch. You're winning the game. And that's something that Kenny Pickett will learn. But Deontay Johnson, he basically he had the one hit him in the hands in the middle of the field, and then it got knocked up in the air, and it becomes an interception. They've got to start coming down with those more. You cannot continue to have balls that hit your receivers in the hands, and they can't come up with them. So, it's easy to blame Mitch Trubisky for all of the troubles with the offense. And like I said, I would have made the switch too, just because I feel like, you were looking for a spark of some sort, even though you're not fully blaming everything on Mitch Trubisky. You're looking for a spark. You're looking for something different. I would have went to Kenny Pickett too, but in the first half, between the penalties, the drops, the ill-conceived, some really bad play calls, and some of the other stuff that went on, the Steelers' offense never really got going and never really had a chance to do what it's possible, what it's possible to do. So, to me, when it happens again, if it bounces off the receiver's hands, you've got to, you blame the receivers. But it'll be a lot easier for people to do that now that Kenny's the quarterback.
I know you want to get into the defense, Paul, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before I get back into the offense because I have a couple of other things. I think the thing that stuck out for me for the defense today was, they were stopping the New York Jets running attack. I think they were doing a pretty good job of getting after Zach Wilson. There were at least a half dozen plays I can think of where he was scrambling around like a chicken with his head cut off, and he really seemed to be flustered by what the Steelers were doing. And just as I was writing those questions in my script that I keep over to the left, everything kind of started to break down. What happened, I guess, is both in the pass rush and in stopping the ground game. Because I think Adam Archuleta on the CBS broadcast was saying, I don't know why the Jets are trying to run because they can't do it on this Steelers front. And then all of a sudden, everything changed.
Well, can we go, Adam, with the be-all, end-all excuse for this defense, which we've had, for the last 3 weeks we've heard, and that is, they just got worn down and they just couldn't, at the end of the game, they were tired because they were on the field so much. I didn't look at the time of possession, but I would be willing to bet it wasn't that lopsided. Let me look at it right now. It wasn't that lopsided. And the thing about it is, 29, actually the Steelers had the ball for about 2 seconds longer than the Jets. And if you think about it, that last drive, the Jets, possessed the ball for about 4 minutes or something or whatever it was, and ran out the clock. I actually got to give the Jets a little bit of credit here. I thought they really managed the clock the way you're supposed to manage a clock when you have the ball, even though they were tied, even though the game was tied. They made sure that basically the Steelers had no time to do anything to get back into the game. It's amazing how many teams don't understand that. They didn't panic and use timeouts. They didn't hurry up because they knew they had their timeouts. They just sort of let the clock bleed. And I thought Mike Tomlin probably missed an opportunity to save about 40 seconds or so by not using his timeout. There was some bad luck there, too. They had 2 injuries that took away timeouts, and that's just, Cam Hayward was cramping up and things of the such. But at the end of the day, the Steelers' defense, I still do not think is as good as it needs to be at the point of attack. And I think everything that is predicated on everything else, if you cannot win at the point of attack, you cannot be a great defense. Now, we talk about it. Will TJ Watt cover some of that? Of course he will. I mean, you put that guy back in the defense, all of a sudden defense has to account for him in every play. It frees some other guys up to do things. But I've said consistently that their defensive line or defensive front, whatever you want to call it, is Cam Hayward and 4 or 5 guys named Mo. That's basically what it is. And, we can sit here and people got excited about Montravius Adams and it's going to be a big difference with him. And Montravius Adams is a guy who should be a backup. And if he's a starter, then he's going to get exposed the more you put him out there. You've got, all the other guys they have. It doesn't matter. They're all nameless, faceless guys to me. And then you go one level behind that, and who's your key run stopper supposed to be back there? Devin Bush.
It's Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Right, but it's become Minkah Fitzpatrick. But my point is, it's supposed to be Devin Bush. I mean, have we seen any evidence at all that he's that guy? I don't think we have. And the other part of it is, in the last 2 drives, Zach Wilson had as much time as he needed to have to throw the ball. He made great throws. Don't get me wrong, but they just didn't put any pressure on him. It was almost like, the Steelers kind of forgot who they are. I know that there's this thing in the NFL. Well, we're going to make them matriculate down the field, and then when they get in the red zone, we'll start playing defense again. But I thought they were just too soft on. Their zones were a little too soft, but more importantly, they didn't come after Zach Wilson at all. And I thought that they let him stand back there and do whatever he wanted to do. Whereas earlier in the game they were putting pressure on they were putting heat on him. These things can't happen if you're a defense that's supposed to be the shutdown, lockdown, great defense that the Steelers want to be. And I know you're missing your best player. I get it. But should TJ Watt be the difference between you winning against the Jets and you losing against the Jets? But it's one thing we're talking about the Bills, right? It's one thing we're talking about the Chiefs. It's one thing we're talking about one of those teams. But this is the Jets. And if you can't beat the Jets and your excuse is we don't have TJ Watt, I don't know what to tell you, because basically what you're telling me is you can't beat anybody. And so I think that's where the Steelers have to do some soul searching. I think on defense as a staff, it seems to me like they're almost overthinking things, Adam. Maybe the 3-headed monster is maybe one of these things where you've got, too many, what is it? Too many Chiefs, not enough Indians. And now you got 3 guys that are basically all think they're the defensive coordinator. I don't know. But to me, I think they basically are getting away a little bit at the end of these games from who they are and what they are. But the one thing that is going to be constant all year long, because as I go back to my line, they're Cam Hayward and 4 or 5 guys named Mo up front, stopping the run at critical times, I think is going to be a problem for this team all year long.
One quick thing on the special teams, Tegan Berkey asked in the chat, when are the Steelers going to return a punt? I think that a lot of people were hopeful that Gunnar Olszewski would change things, because the punt return unit has been an issue for several years for this team. But again, today, he had another, I don't know if it was a fumble or a muff. I don't know what the definition is, but he screwed the play up. And they only lost a few yards, but that could have been, that could have been the end of the game right there. What is going on, and when is this special teams unit? I shouldn't say special teams because Chris Boswell hit a stadium record field goal today, but this punt return unit is also it's a small thing. It's not as big as the other things we're talking about today, but it's still noteworthy that these things are happening on punt returns, and he was supposed to fix this.
The defensive coordinator will always tell you the most important thing when it comes to the punt return is just catching the punt. If you get 10 yards or 15 yards on your punt return, it's gravy, right? If you run one back for a touchdown, it's even more gravy. But defensive coordinators, it's like, all right, we did our job, we got off the field. Now you better catch this ball. And so you can't put the ball on the ground. I think Gunnar Olszewski's back there because he catches the ball. He put it on the ground, and that'll probably be something that they'll look at this week. But I don't think that it's a big deal that they don't get a lot of yardage out of their punt returns. You look around the NFL, Adam, how many punt returns will be 20 yards or more this year? With all 32 teams, 17 games, how many 20-plus yard punt returns will there be? I don't know, 5, 8 maybe? you just don't get that many punt returns because teams are too good at covering. The key is you catch. There's three things about the punt returner you want. You want them to catch the ball, right, and not fumble it. Number two, you want them to make good decisions about when to fair catch it and when to catch it, maybe try and make a few yards. And I think number three, which Gunnar Olszewski at least once didn't do well, you have to get to the ball and not let it bounce and cost your team 10, 15, 20 yards because you don't go to the ball and catch it. You've got to get to the ball and make sure you get underneath it so that even if you fair catch it, you're fair catching it at the 30 as opposed to letting it hit at the 31 and roll to the 21. That's the biggest thing. So I think the punt return, the Steelers have many issues. I think that's very, very far down on the priority list.
I just want to get the commenters involved, Paul. But one thing I did want to ask you, going back to the offense, is that I think we finally saw them go back to the middle of the field, which was something we hadn't seen in the early weeks. And they were doing it while Mitch Trubisky was in there too. It wasn't just once Kenny Pickett entered the game. They got Freiermuth involved early. I thought that was important. Were you encouraged by that and the way that they were looking at using the whole field today?
Listen, Pat Freiermuth is one of your best players. So why, you've got to get him involved a lot, especially down in the middle of the field, because that's where you're going to create matchup problems. And it's to me, you're taking away a big weapon by not using him that way. And it's not just him. You can have slot receivers that get to the middle of the field, but all you're looking to do is create that matchup where we've got one of our skill guys against your linebacker, and your linebacker can't keep up with him. That's what you're looking to do. And I thought, a big play in the game, obviously, was the play where Kenny Pickett dropped back and took a big hit, but just kind of put the ball out into the middle. It was perfect. Like, he threw it on time. Those plays are there in the seam, especially when a team is bringing heat at you, so to not use them is foolish. You're not using the whole field. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I think this is an important question now, Paul, now that we've seen, Mike Tomlin cut bait with Mitch Trubisky, go to Kenny Pickett, make that big decision that I wasn't necessarily expecting, whether we thought it should be coming or not. Is Matt Canada on the clock now this season? Because I've insisted when I've been asked before, what's going to happen with Matt Canada. I never got the impression that they were going to cut bait on him until the end of the season at the earliest. But I was surprised how quickly they ultimately did go to Kenny Pickett, despite what they were saying in the preseason and the early season. And I think if that, now there's nowhere else to look, right? It's just going to be Matt Canada in the spotlight. Do you think it's possible that if this continues, we could see a new play caller before the end of the season?
Boy, I still have a hard time believing that that would be so out of character for the Steelers to do it that way, and for Mike Tomlin to do it that way. It could be one of these things where, like a couple of years ago, Mike Tomlin quietly took away the play calling duties on defense from Keith Butler. We didn't hear about it till near the end of the season. Then all of a sudden we started to hear about it. But I have a hard time believing that he would fire a guy outright like that. And that's just, not the way the Steelers do things. It's not the way that Mike Tomlin's going to do things. And I just think that people that are calling for Matt Canada to be fired in season probably are going to be very disappointed. Listen, okay, now let's see what he can do with Kenny Pickett. And maybe the quarterback was that much of a problem that his offense was going to be. I mean, I'm willing to be open-minded about it. I just know that I look at, his history as a play caller, and you take away that year at Pitt, where they went crazy with James Conner and company. I don't know that there's a whole lot to get excited about on his resume. So, but you got to be open-minded about it. That's the thing. Everybody wants to write the stories before they actually happen. Let's see what happens. Now you got Kenny Pickett. It looks like Kenny Pickett's probably going to throw the ball a little bit more down the field, a little bit more down into the middle of the field, and you go from there. But if I were the Steelers, I honestly, if you don't think that Mitch Trubisky is going to be your starter next week, I would make Mason Rudolph my backup, because we've already seen what Mitch Trubisky can do. If Kenny Pickett goes out there and struggles in the first half, we'll throw Mason Rudolph in there. But if he's inactive, you can't do that. So that's what I would do. I know that if Mike Tomlin hasn't, he basically, I just saw he said exactly what I said he was going to say, which is, I needed a spark, not committing to anything for next week. Well, if you go to Kenny Pickett next week, you should go to Mason Rudolph as your backup because of exactly what I just said. It gives you the option if Kenny Pickett doesn't get it done. So, well, let's see what Mason Rudolph can do.
I want to follow up on the question about Canada's future because I think you're right for two reasons. I think number one, who else are you going to go to midseason? You're not going to bring anyone else in from the outside. The options are going to be rather limited unless someone gets fired somewhere. I think you're going to have a limited pool of play callers. And number two, who is the person on the staff on the inside? Because that's probably where you're going to get an interim play caller. Who on this staff are you going to trust to be taking over the reins? I think it's a little bit different for the defense because Mike Tomlin has been a defensive coordinator and he's been a guy who could, call a defense if he had lost confidence in Keith Butler or whomever. I don't think you have that with the offense. I don't think you have any young talent here where you're looking over Matt Canada's shoulder and saying, I want that guy. Where I think sometimes that does happen around the NFL where there are guys on staff where you can look. And I would say the Steelers maybe have a similar situation now with Brian Flores on the staff. If you weren't happy with Terrell Austin, that's someone that people would want, to turn to because he has the pedigree. I don't think the Steelers have anyone with the pedigree to do that, to make that move in season.
Well, I will say that, didn't Mike Sullivan call plays for a couple of years? If I'm not mistaken.
He may have, yes.
I think he might have been like the Giants coordinator for a year or two. Again, I don't think it's a practical thing to do if you're the Steelers. So I think people that are calling for Matt Canada's head in mid-season, you're going to probably be disappointed. And again, he's got a new quarterback now. I like I said, I have a hard time believing that they're going to go back to Mitch Trubisky for next week. So I would look at it and just basically say, this year, you're going to get experience for your rookie quarterback, and you're going to see if you have the right offensive coordinator. I know it's not as exciting as we're going to go for a Super Bowl. And maybe by the end of the year, they're playing much better, but I don't know. I'm looking at a defense that's got some real holes and things of the such. I don't necessarily know that I see this as a team that's going to get on track and make this deep playoff run. But by the end of the year, you're going to know if you have the right coordinator. And you're also going to know what you have in your quarterback. And I think that's probably what should have been the goal, anyway. So we'll see how it works out.
We are winding down here on Post-Gazette Sports now. So if you have any last-minute questions, please hop in the comments on YouTube and add them, and we will try to get to them. Paul, I think to that last point you made, the big thing for me is I look at the Steelers this year as year one of a year two project. And I think the goal – and I think you have to look at this season with the goal of being a good team by the end of next year in mind. Once you don't have to worry about the quarterback in the draft, once you don't have to worry about some other positions, and you can use that draft capital to beef up some of these weaknesses that we've been talking about well before Ben Roethlisberger retired. And so through that context, when I look at Matt Canada, I say, I think you give him the year to figure out, can he be your coordinator? And then if not, then you look at getting someone new going into next year, because I think that's the year that you're going to compete anyway. One other short question I had for you. Jaylen Warren's got to stop fumbling, right? I mean, I like a lot about what he's done, but I think this is the third one that he's dropped.
He does. That was actually probably on Kenny Pickett. It was a bad pitch. And I'll tell you, Jaylen Warren made an incredible play to turn that into a 6-yard loss instead of about a 12-yard loss. So I don't put that one on him. I think he made a great play to pick the ball up and to get it, to where it wasn't a complete loss. So that's just the way it goes. I like the way the kid runs. I think he's a good player. I do. I like a lot about what he does. Still waiting for, Najee Harris to be that guy. But, I think they've got a pretty good option in Warren.
All right, that's all I got for you, Paul. Is there anything else that you stuck out to you today you wanted to get to before we sign off?
No, other than not exactly a great weekend for the home teams here at Acrisure Stadium. I mean, that's just if you'd have told me if you'd have told me going into this weekend that both teams would lose at home here this weekend to Georgia Tech and the Jets, I'd have said no way. I'd have had a hard time believing one of them was going to lose, much less both. So let's hope the next time they open the doors here, I guess it would be next Saturday against Virginia Tech, that it'd be a better day for the home crowd.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here, folks. Again, if you're just joining us for the first time with all the Kenny Pickett excitement today, please remember to like this video and then subscribe so that you don't miss any of our videos. We'll be back tomorrow with the North Shore Drive. I believe it'll be Christopher Carter and Ray Fittipaldo breaking things down just like me and Paul did. So make sure you're subscribed for that. Please remember that subscription deal too. $6 for 6 months of access for everything me and Paul are writing, everything our Steelers beat reporters are writing. It's going to be a busy week on postgazette.com, so you don't want to miss it. Thank you for joining us. We had a record audience today, and we're really appreciative of the support you've all been giving for the channel so far. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week when the Steelers take on – it's the Bills, right, Paul? Am I just forgetting? Are they facing the Bills next week?
Yeah, I think it's the Bills.
Well, whoever they're playing, we'll be here, and hope you'll join us then. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Take care, everyone.